Do I like Greg Doucette's book Harder Than Last Time? Yeah. Is it overpriced? Possibly. And that's what I'm going to discuss today. Okay, so I'm sure there's a lot of you watching this video who probably remember a previous video that I had up on this channel that I've since taken down. It was because it was a complete dumpster fire, and this time around I decided to actually do a proper review of Greg's book, so here we go. Now the bottom line is I like Greg's book, Harder Than Last Time. I do. It contains a lot of great information in it. So for those who don't know, and honestly most of you watching this right now, probably all of you probably know who Greg is. He is popular here on YouTube. He's an IFBB pro. He also has a master's degree in kinesiology. He's been training clients for a long, long time. So the guy has both knowledge and experience. He knows what he's talking about. He knows what he's doing. And that's reflected in his book. There's, like I said, a lot of great information in it. So he has quite a lot of sections to go over how you should be training and basic training principles altogether. You're gonna get a good idea on how to properly train and how to make good progress and how to track that progress. You will, because Greg goes over all of that. Now there are a couple sections here that I think he skimped out on a little bit, or should have added a little bit more detail, or a couple things that I honestly disagree with, and I'm going to be going over those in just a second. But to begin with, he begins the whole book before he even gets to the training programs he includes in the book. Basically how to go about training. He has a section on motivation, basically how to be motivated to go to the gym and actually train, and how to do that consistently as well. He also has a section going over gym intimidation, because a lot of people, especially beginners, are a little intimidated because they're afraid they might be judged by other people. He discusses all of that and how it's a bunch of bogus. And he also discusses expectations, meaning don't expect to put on 50 pounds of muscle in 6 months, which is impossible, even for a beginner, unless you're on gear. And even then. So he actually discusses quite a few things that I wasn't expecting him to talk about, and that a lot of books like this actually don't include. So I want to give him a lot of kudos for including these things, because these are important things for people to read. Now, once he discusses all those things, he starts to get into more detailed sections on training principles. The first one being about cardio. And I agree with his section here on cardio for the most part. So he discusses how it's actually very important, because your heart here is a muscle like any other part of your body, or any other muscle part of your body, which it is, and it's overall very important for your health. So you gotta exercise this in order to actually be in truly good shape and to live a long, healthy life. And what he recommends doing is steady state cardio for 150 minutes a week. And you break that up however you need to break it up to make sure you complete that 150 minutes. Now, I agree with him the amount, the type of cardio I also agree with. You know, he states that you shouldn't necessarily be doing any running or anything like that, because it's actually not that good for you and it's horrible for your joints, all of which is true. And he also even covers when you should be doing cardio and how you break that up, which is for the most part doing cardio on your off days, or the days that you don't lift. And if you do have to do cardio on the day that you do lift, because it's just the way your schedule goes out, he recommends doing your cardio after lifting. Now, that's not wrong. I honestly agree with that. That's my opinion as well. However, there's one thing I do want to state here. Dr. Sharnarn, he's currently the head of the Exercise Science Department at the University of South Carolina. Before that, he was the head of the Sports Performance Lab at Rutgers University. And his lab conducted actual research on this, when the best time was to do cardio, before or after lifting. Now, before that, the consensus was that you should do it after, because if you do it before, then you're going to lose some of your strength gains, or can limit how much strength you can gain or how much muscle you can gain. But in Dr. Arndt's research, it was shown that it actually doesn't really make much of a difference whether you do it before or after. It's not going to really jeopardize any muscle or strength gains that you have. At least that's what his research showed. So it can really go towards a personal reference. But like I said, both Craig and I personally do recommend doing it after. And the reason is because I think, and I'm going to bet that this is the same way that Craig is thinking as well, is that you want to save the days that you're lifting, your energy to go towards that lifting session, not to go towards your cardio session, but to your lifting session. Now, after the cardio section, he then has a diet section. Now, again, this book isn't about diet. He doesn't really go into much detail about it. I can understand why. He has other books about diet where he goes into far more detail. But having said that, there's a couple things he should have included in this section. Now, he talks about the overall principles for weight loss, which is basically reducing the number of calories you consume, which is the basics, really. That's how you lose weight, along with exercise. However, what he also mentions is that your diet should consume a good amount of protein and carbs, not to skip carbs or anything like that. That, again, I agree with, because you need carbs to build muscle. Having said that, what he should have included, because it would have only taken up another small paragraph, honestly, was how much protein to consume and carbs and then fats as well, because you do need fats. Now, I'm not talking about potato chips or unhealthy fats like that. No, I'm talking about fats like olive oil or nuts like almonds, fats from those. And like I said, also, he should have put in that you need roughly 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. That's what research has shown to be around the optimal amount for muscle growth. Maybe a little bit more depending on the person and what their exact goals are, along with their genetics. And then the rest of your diet, being made up of those carbs and fats as well. Now, after these sections, he starts kind of like a part 2, which is a training section now. This is where he starts going over the basic principles of his program and the overall lifting principles that you need to know. So he goes over progressive overload, which I think is great that he included this. He actually goes into nice detail about this. He also covers periodization. Again, not a huge amount of detail, but enough for you to understand why it's important. He also goes over how to read the program, how to determine how much weight you're gonna use, and the number of sets you're gonna use, why he put the program the way that it is, or programmed it the way that it is. He goes into a lot of detail here. Now, I'm not gonna go into everything because this would just kind of give away the book, and that wouldn't be fair to him. But trust me, guys, he does go into a ton of detail on almost every exercise principle that you would need to know to get started and to do his program well. Now, there's a couple things that I want to discuss in this section that I have a little bit of, not necessarily disagreement, but some things that I think he should have included, some basic feedback. So the first thing is that when he talks about reps, he talks about how you should shoot for a rep range. This is correct, okay? Because like he says, it's impossible to determine based on you how many reps you really should do. It's impossible for him to determine that. So he gives you a rep range to shoot for. And he splits his programs into a hypertrophy focus or more strength focus. And obviously the one with hypertrophy is gonna have a higher number of reps, higher volume than the one with a strength focus. Now, one thing that I honestly have a little bit of different opinion on is the number of reps to be completed on certain exercises. Now, the highest he puts in any of his programs is 15 reps. This is fine, you'll get plenty of stimulus with this, but there's been other people like Dr. Mike Israel.
Dr. Mike Israel,
who we all know is best buds with Greg here, that he recommends for some of your exercises going even up to 20 to 30 reps for some of those exercises. Like tricep extensions, for example. You can do that enormous high volume. On compound movements, not so much, but a lot of isolation movements, you can, to get truly great stimulus for it. But again, people are gonna have different opinions about it. It depends on the person and what works best for them. Now, the last two things I wanna talk about here before getting into the program itself, which is gonna be relatively short because it is good programming that he has, is he provides an exercise library, so the list of exercises that you can do in the program itself, and then also how to determine how much weight to use for each of the sets in those exercises. Now, the exercise library is fine. The exercise he lists are great. They're staples, they will work. One thing though I think you should have included here though is how to make substitutions. He talks about the importance of substitutions and putting in exercises that work best for you and provide the most stimulus for you. But he doesn't discuss how to know when to make those substitutions or why you necessarily should be making those substitutions. This is something I talked about in a ton of other programs, from Jeff Nibbards to Jeremy Etheridge and a ton of other ones. And again, I'm still not seeing in any program I come across, guys, it's important to know when and how and why you need to make those substitutions. And then in the section where he talks about how to determine weight, he ranks it as putting in light, moderate, heavy, or heavier, along with intensity. This is fine. I think most of you won't have necessarily an issue determining your weight for this. He explains it pretty well, but I personally would have made it more as on a scale like RPE, rate of perceived exertion, because I think that's easier to keep track of, along with easier to measure, because it's a number scale, 1 through 10, instead of just determining, okay, is this weight light or is it moderate? You know on a scale here where that weight's gonna be. That's just my opinion. Again, like I said, the way he put it, I don't think is wrong. I think most of you won't have an issue with that. In fact, probably none of you will, but I just think that's the way that I would have done it instead. Now, getting into the programs themselves, finally, like I said, I think he did actually a really great job in how he programmed them. Now, he provides 12 programs in here, and that's because he wants you to choose the best one for you, along with how many days per week you want to train. Realistically, can train. Now, obviously, like he mentions, life can get in the way, but for the most part can consistently stick with. But overall, guys, I think the way, again, he made the programs are great. Okay, there's really honestly not much for me to say here about that, because I've talked a little bit about that earlier on, but overall, he just, like I said, he has the experience and the knowledge to know how to make good programs, and it's reflected in the book. Now, having said all that, let's address the 500-pound elephant in the room, which is the cost of the book. It's $200. That's expensive, no matter which way you look at it. But the main question you have to ask yourself is that worth it? Are you willing to pay that price? Is it worth to you to pay that price? And it's gonna be dependent on the person. Now, I've gone back and forth with myself, determining whether this is a fair price, whether it's worth it or not. So this is the best that I was able to come up with. In my perspective, when you concentrate on perspective, with my background, having a master's degree and having already known pretty much everything in this book because of my background, fitness, the certifications I have, the CSCS, along with already training general population and athletes, no, to me, it's not worth $200. Again, that's for me, personally. I've never paid for any of my books, any training manuals that were as expensive as this. Not even the textbooks in grad school that I had were this much. So I mean, I have a huge stack here of books. From this one, Exercise Physiology, to this book on anatomy and physiology, to this book on my certification exam, to this one on program design and technique from the NSCA, on this one from Exercise Physiology. This is actually one of the main and well-written principles, exercise principles of exercise physiology, to, again, strength anatomy, to a gigantic book here from a conference I went to, from all the notes, along with other ones from other conferences I went to. None of those, again, like I said, cost me $200. But having said that, all of that added together is certainly a lot more than $200. And it was a mix between I had to read all that because of grad school, along with I wanted to read all that because this is what my background is, this is what my career is. Training people, I'm a personal trainer, you know. I have a certification in it. I had to do a lot of studying with it. So I had to spend that amount of money. So at the end of the day, guys, with your perspective, are you gonna be reading all these books I just showed you? No. Most of you don't even necessarily wanna go into that much science or that much specificity when it comes to exercise science. Most of you guys aren't going to be interested in or care what the byproduct of glycolysis is, such as like fast glycolysis, which is lactate. Most of you aren't going to care what ATP is. Most of you aren't necessarily going to care what the 9 essential amino acids are. Okay, most of you aren't going to care. You just want to know how to properly train and how to follow a program and how to tailor it specifically towards your needs, which is what this book does. At the end of the day, to answer this question, guys, is it worth it? I honestly don't know. because it's going to depend on you. If this is the only book you're interested in getting, you like Greg, then maybe it is worth the price. But if you're interested in other books as well, then maybe not. Because for example, this other book I have here from Josh Bryant, Built to the Hilt, it's one of my favorite books on how to put on mass and strength. It's a fantastic book. And it's 300 pages worth. It goes into a ton of detail. And it's all of, I think, $50 up on Amazon right now. And then you can add in RP, Renaissance Periodization's diet book as well, and still be well below what Greg is asking for his price. This is a decision you have to make. I'm not criticizing him for charging this price. I'm not. It's just something that you really need to think about, whether it truly is worth it. Because like I said, I can't really honestly answer that question for you. I stated all the information about the book, that it's a good book, what it all contains, but you gotta go in and determine, do you really wanna spend this amount of price, or do you wanna look at some other places? So that is my main review, guys, for this. I'm gonna give his book an 8.5 out of 10. Overall, like I said, I think it's a great book. He has a lot of detail on how to train, the principles, and the programming itself is great. But like I said, there's a few things I think he skipped on, or I disagree with a little bit. And of course, you have that big part there, which is just, it's expensive, very, very expensive. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed that review I did of Greg Doucette. I know this was a long one, but it's a long book. There was a lot to go over. So I hope you enjoyed this review and you stuck with me throughout the whole thing. And if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do. I would really, really appreciate it, and hit that like button as well. And I will see you guys next week.